And I think we have to ask, do today's Marxist activists have any reason to say that they hate above anyone else in the world the church leaders most celebrated by our cultural elites? Or do they find that their efforts are not only not hampered by Christian cultural elites, but are in fact helped by them?
Megan Basham of the Daily Wire, speaking at the 2026 Issues Etc. Making the Case conference.
We must resist the infiltrators and use our power in such a way that when those who oppose the cause of Christ are asked who they hate most in the world, they think of our names.
You can watch Megan Basham making the case against progressive influence in the church from this year's Making the Case conference. For a contribution of $250 by Labor Day, we'll send you a link to watch the entire conference. Learn more at issuesetc.org.
I think the fate of Christianity in Europe should be very, very sobering for Christians in America and make them realize that nothing can be taken for granted at this point.
What you actually can affirm for your child is you are baptized. You don't need to be defined by this gender dysphoria that's nagging at you and trying to get you to carve up your body and make all these changes. You are actually defined by what God says.
Union with the flesh of Jesus. There is nothing greater than that. And American evangelicalism cannot say that. It's a disembodied Christ. There's no Jesus in the water, Jesus in the Word, Jesus in your ear, Jesus in your mouth.
All of the Lutherans from the very beginning to the very end teach not only that good works are to be done, but even the necessity of good works.
Grocery clerks in Tennessee love listening to Issues Etc.
The billboards that were purchased in several states simply had two sentences on them. No child has two dads, no child has two moms. The reaction was well out of proportion with what seems to be kind of a common sense biological statement. Greetings and welcome to Issues Etc. live on this Wednesday afternoon, August the 12th. I'm Todd Wilkin. Thanks for tuning us in. We're going to be responding to criticisms of a pro-natural family billboard campaign with Katy Faust of Them Before Us. Terry Mattingly joins us to discuss media coverage of the religious faith of WNBA star Sophie Cunningham. We'll respond to listener email and the Issues Etc. comment line. Then Dr. Mark Thompson joins us for part one of a conversation on family discipleship. Katy Faust is a married mother of 4 children in Seattle, founder and director of the children's rights organization Them Before Us, leader of the Greater Than campaign, editor and author of a chapter in the book Pro-Child Politics, and a recent column for The Federalist, No Child Has Two Moms is controversial only in an anti-child society. Katy, welcome back.
Hey, thanks for having me again, Todd.
Why did Them Before Us do these billboard ads?
All right, so the reality is it was just a whim. Somebody was like, hey, have you ever done billboards? We're like, no, we haven't. And like billboards, what are we, in the 1980s? But we're like, well, let's give it a try. And we had no idea that it was going to go as far as it went. That last week and the week before, I feel like it was all anybody was talking about. We saw it posted across dozens of Facebook pages. It was kicked up by like mega accounts on Twitter. The Babylon Bee was covering it. We had local news calling us. But yeah, this billboard that we put up that just says no child has two dads, no child has two moms, probably had 500 million impressions. Really because there was backlash from one specific little town in Ohio that did a few posts about it, and then it just spread like wildfire.
So describe the reaction, if you would.
Well, first of all, it was one woman that said, I saw this billboard and I can't imagine the intolerance right here in our little town of Lima, Ohio. And then you had gay organizations saying, this is just inappropriate. You know, this is inappropriate for people to be seeing when they're driving to and from work. And then, of course, the accusation that this is harming children with two mothers or two fathers. I mean, this is not something that they should have to see just driving to and from school. And I fielded an awful lot of media requests for this. And I just want to say, like, it's actually laughable that you, the LGBT organization, are saying that my billboard stating a non-negotiable, universal human truth is inappropriate, when I bet you guys are the same people promoting drag queens twerking in front of preschoolers. So don't come out here and tell me what is and is not appropriate. There were anti-billboard campaigns put up where they raised money to say, you are loved, and there was hit pieces written about it by major LGBT groups. I mean, it went viral in a way that we never expected.
You say that all these negative reactions are really completely backwards. What do you mean?
Well, mostly they accused us of generating harm, right? Harming LGBT people, harming their children. But the reality is the very ideas that they promote, specifically that mothers and fathers are optional in the life of children, that is what harms kids. So I wanted to focus a lot in the article that I published at the Federalist yesterday about that. Just like, how do you get to the point where the thing that reveals the harm, the billboard, is actually the thing people freak out about rather than the conditions that lead to the harm itself? What harms children? Losing one or both of their biological parents, not because of tragedy, but because some adult agenda, because some new adult priority, because some adult's identity decided that their mother or father was optional in their life. That is what harms children.
How did the redefinition of marriage lead inevitably to the redefinition of parenthood?
This is something that everybody needs to understand. Everybody needs to understand. We think about gay marriage and we think, okay, whatever, new civil right, or maybe the biggest problem with gay marriage is that, it infringes on the baker or the cake maker or the candlestick maker or the counselor. We think about it as a religious liberty problem. But the reality is redefining marriage is a problem for children. Why? Because it leads directly to the redefinition of parenthood. When you make husbands and wives optional in marriage, mothers and fathers become optional in parenthood. And the article that I wrote was how we had all these different coordinated sectors of American society, from the law to the courts to the media to technology to school curriculum, all as soon as Obergefell was decided swinging around to get behind this idea that mothers and fathers are optional in the life of a child. So you can see it culturally, you can see it legally, you can see it technologically, that what followed from gay marriage? The erasure of mothers and fathers.
So let's walk through some of those factors, beginning with the legal re-education of the American public on children, mothers, and fathers.
So the first major legal step that we saw after the 2015 Obergefell decision was a case in Arkansas called Pavon versus Smith. This is where two lesbian couples petitioned the state of Arkansas to say, we want to have our names on our children's birth certificates. If a woman can list her husband as the other parent of the child that she gave birth to, why can't I list my wife as the other parent of the child that I am giving birth to? Now, let the reader understand, there's a big difference between a woman listing her husband, who is almost always the biological father of the child, on the birth certificate, than a lesbian listing her partner as the other parent on the child's birth certificate. Why? Because that child is never biologically related to the partner. Never, ever, ever. Categorically, definitionally. So that was the first big legal change that we saw. Then, that same year, the Uniform Law Commission, which is a group of lawyers that recommends policy and statutes across the country, recategorized what mother and father means in a statute they call the Uniform Parentage Act. This is how do you uniformly identify parents and parentage. Well, they stripped the words mothers and fathers out of the Uniform Parentage Act. They recommended that you make mother and father rules gender neutral. They created alternative pathways for adults to acquire children because two same-sex parents can never both be biologically related. So they needed to find some other way to recognize same-sex parents other than biology and other than the cumbersome process of adoption. So within a couple years, we're starting to see the law reorienting itself around adult identity, not child reality of mother and father.
You say that these legal efforts really were, as you just mentioned, an attempt to erase mothers and fathers from the law. Have they been successful?
In many states, they have. Why? Because they're following the recommendations of the Uniform Parentage Act. So, for example, just a couple of months ago, many of you guys might remember that there was a huge freak out in New York. Why? Because New York wanted to change the words mother and father in their parenting statutes to gestating and non-gestating parents. And a bunch of people got really mad at Kathy Hochul. Why is she allowing this? Why doesn't she veto it? That is not a Kathy Hochul problem. That is a gay marriage problem. That stems directly from the redefinition of parenthood that Obergefell triggered. So we are seeing mothers and fathers being scrubbed from various different statutes in various states, specifically the ones that adopted the Uniform Parentage Act recommendations that were driven specifically in the name of constitutionality and non-discrimination for LGBT adults. So even though this whole gay marriage thing was sold on, well, this is just about what happens in the privacy of adults' bedrooms, inevitably it does and it will lead to the erasure of mothers and fathers-in-law.
How did public education and the teachers' unions join the campaign to erase natural parents?
Well, now I think we are all very aware that the teachers' unions are not neutral players when it comes to the making of the social fabric. Before Obergefell, they had a curriculum that talked about respecting different family structures, but they still recommended celebrating things like Mother's Day and Father's Day. They still used the words male and female, mom and dad. But after 2015, they started to reissue their curriculum. They started to collaborate with wild leftist LGBT organizations to normalize missing mothers and fathers, to list two moms and two dads as just one of the many different ways that you can make a family, including single mothers or grandparented homes or blended families and nuclear families. I mean, it's really all just the same, all different ways that love can make a family. And so you're messaging oftentimes to kindergartners, 5-year-olds, 6-year-olds, normalizing a missing mother or father in curriculum. So this was overt. This was something that was directed at the very first years of schooling that kids are going to participate in. And it has been, I would say, successful in a lot of ways, because you are getting kids that are believing that, you know what, this sadness that I feel, this hunger that I have for a mother or father, it's probably me. I'm probably the problem. And very few children would dare to voice that they struggle without their mom or dad, partially because their very teachers are telling them to celebrate the mother or father loss they may have experienced in the name of adult equality.
What did the entertainment industry do to normalize unnatural parenthood?
Well, I think that all of us noticed the massive overrepresentation of LGBT characters in our TV series, in the movies that we're watching. That is by design. You know, there were LGBT groups that wanted to have that quote-unquote increased representation, and it went far beyond the number of people that actually identified as gay, lesbian, or trans. I mean, there felt like there was a gay character or a trans character somewhere in every movie, somewhere in every series. Well, specifically, children's entertainment got in on this too. And now, you know, I listed several in the article of major popular programming, kids programming, cartoons that feature two mothers or two fathers, that promote absence mother, absence fathers, that talk about the beauties and the wonders, the blessings, the health of having two dads or two moms instead of a mom or a dad. So if people wanted to reinforce and condition this idea that children have two mothers or two fathers, they have child-centric programming at nearly every age to reinforce that message.
Has Big Fertility gotten in on it? Are they profiting from these efforts?
Well, the only way that two men or two women can make a baby, not adopt a baby, but make a baby, is by doing so in a laboratory. That is not something that you can do in the quote-unquote privacy of your own bedroom. You actually have to have a third party involved in that. And when you are making a child in a laboratory, it does not matter if you use somebody else's egg or somebody else's sperm or place it in somebody else's womb. So Big Fertility is the hinge on which this door must swing. And it is not cheap to make a motherless or fatherless child, specifically a motherless child. And because Big Fertility is so unregulated, there is so much money to be made. I think that gay marriage got an awful lot of mileage off this idea that if we legalize same-sex marriage, that means all these couples will be rushing to adopt unwanted children out of the foster care system. And it's true that some same-sex couples adopt out of foster care, but one study showed that 66% of them they want a biological baby like everybody else. Maybe they will choose adoption or foster care because it's too expensive to make a biologically related child in some way, shape, or form. But most of them will prefer to manufacture that child into existence and explicitly cut out their mother or father if they can. So yeah, big fertility is a big part of the remaking of the modern family and the exclusion of a child's mother or father, not from birth, but from at the moment of conception.
What do children themselves say about being cut off from their mothers, fathers, or even both?
So I take great offense at the accusation that we are causing harm, that the billboard is the thing that is traumatizing or creating pain in the life of these children. That is false. Children experience this pain, oftentimes greater pain, when the society will not acknowledge what they have lost. If you have ever met a child who does not have a mother or father, tell me whether or not they care. Most of them care, notice, at minimum are curious. Many of them agonize. Many of them wait by the telephone, hoping that their father is actually going to call them on their birthday. And when they don't, they're devastated. Welcome to the world of human children. Missing your mother and father creates pain, loss, trauma, and sometimes lifelong disadvantage. And yet these kids with two mothers or two fathers, they experience the same pain, but they're told, you should be grateful. You're so loved. You're so lucky. Look how much your parents wanted you. And it actually creates this national form of gaslighting in children who are told that what they feel, the regular thing that every human child throughout history has ever wanted, to be known and loved by their mother and father, is actually a form of homophobia. And so we are the ones that are giving permission to these children to express and to speak about the things that they're experiencing, whereas the quote-unquote pro-gay, LGBT-friendly crowd is actually the one are keeping those kids in the closet.
Talk about the cruelty of lying to children about their natural parents.
Well, here's the thing. I list a couple different testimonies in that article about two women who grew up with two mothers. And they were surrounded by women who were saying, you're so lucky. And if they expressed that they wanted a father, they were told repeatedly, you don't have a father, you have two mothers. And they felt so guilty. Millie said, Millie Fontana, this one woman that I quote, she said, I felt awful about myself. Because everyone is saying this other woman is enough for you. This other mother is all it takes to fulfill you. So what is wrong with me that I still want a father? There must be something wrong with me. And Heather Barwick, another woman that I quote, she talks about how she grew up in a world of solely women. It was all lesbians. And she was told repeatedly, messaged, you shouldn't want a father. Men are bad, right? Why would we ever want anything to do with a man? And yet, as a little girl, she says, I so desperately wanted a daddy. So what does that communicate to that little girl? There is something broken with her. It's not the world that starved her of a father that's wrong. She is wrong. She's wrong for wanting what every human child has ever wanted. It is a cruelty to children to tell them that they have two mothers or two fathers. That is what the Billboard outrage should have been focused on, is this whole coordinated national campaign that is sought to normalize the absence of a child's mother and father when those very children themselves know in their heart that it's not normal.
Katy Faust is a married mother of 4 children in Seattle, founder and director of the children's rights organization, Them Before Us, leader of the Greater Than campaign, editor and author of a chapter in the book Pro-Child Politics, and a recent column for The Federalist, No Child Has Two Moms, is controversial only in an anti-child society. We'll post a link to it and to Them Before Us on the podcast page for this episode at issuesetc.org. Katy, thanks.
Thanks, Todd.
Megan Basham, Molly Hemingway, Ryan Anderson, Brad Wilcox. These were some of the speakers at the 2026 Issues Etc. Making the Case conference. And for a donation of $250 by Labor Day, September 7th, we'll send you a link to on-demand video streams and audio downloads of the entire conference. Learn more at issuesetc.org or by giving us a call, 618-223-8385. Terry Mattingly joins us on the other side of the break. We'll talk about media coverage of the religious faith of WNBA star Sophie Cunningham.
It's also a confirmation a confirmation of what the church has proclaimed for millennia, that we are not made to be alone, but we are made for covenant.
Sociologist Dr. Brad Wilcox speaking at this year's Issues Etc. Making the Case conference.
So give today's young men and women the truth that they deserve. Pursue marriage, pursue it with intention, and pursue it in your 20s, when the window is widest and the possibilities most open. The road ahead, of course, is not easy, but it leads somewhere worth going, and you, 20-somethings here, were made for this journey.
You can watch and listen to Dr. Brad Wilcox making the case for 20-something marriage from the 2026 Making the Case conference. For a $250 gift by Labor Day, we'll send you a link to video and audio recordings of the entire conference. Learn more at issuesetc.org.
Where Christianity meets culture, you're listening to Issues Etc.
Lutherans for Life provides unique gospel-centered, life-issue-focused educational resources, audio-video training, post-abortion counseling, and more from a Lutheran perspective. Learn about LFL resources and forming a life team or life chapter or becoming a life advocate by calling 888-364-LIFE or by calling 888-364-5433 or visiting lutheransforlife.org. lutheransforlife.org.
Have you ever wanted to enter a program that teaches right habits and intellectual rigor as you apprehend the beautiful, the good, and the holy, all the while learning classical languages and reading classical texts? Do you want to be a classical scholar? I'm Dr. Charles Schultz, the new leader of the Classical Lutheran Education Program at Concordia, Chicago. Learn more about this program at CUC by visiting cuchicago.edu, cuchicago.edu.